Having avoided the wreckage of the sinking Hood, Captain Leach ordered Prince of Wales back onto her original course. The evasive manoeuvre wooded WWII turret, which had only just entered the battle. In the water, Ted Briggs watched Prince of Wales as she raced by and thought that her chances of survival were slim. When Hood was hit, the range between the two opposing squadrons had decreased sufficiently to permit Prince of Wales to open fire with her starboard 5.25-inch secondary armament. The British battleship was in almost exactly the same position that the Hood had been moments before, meaning that for the gunners aboard Bismarck, only a slight correction was necessary in order to allow them to engage the new target. As soon as Prince of Wales had settled down, and as soon as her forward turrets could be retrained on Bismarck, she fired her 11th salvo, which landed short. Having cleared the sinking Hood, Prince of Wales entered a port turn, which would enable her to train WWII turret on the enemy. By the time WWII turret had been brought into action once more, the No. 3 gun of A turret was temporarily out of action owing to mechanical trouble. The total firepower of the ship had now been reduced by 20%. Aboard Bismarck, adjustments were made and the ship fired her second salvo at the new target. Almost immediately, a heavy hit was felt. A 15-inch shell landed short of the target and splashed down into the sea, but retained enough velocity to penetrate the bilge keel. The shell left behind a trail of destruction, marked by twisted metal and jagged holes, before coming to rest, minus its ballistic cap, beside the armoured bulkhead in the immediate vicinity of the main engineering spaces. At 6:01 and 40 seconds, Bismarck fired her third salvo at Prince of Wales. The salvo flew mostly above the target, but two shells from the salvo, likely from the same turret, found their mark at 6:02 when they struck the forward upper works. One of the shells passed diagonally through the compass platform, killing everyone with the exception of Leach, Lieutenant Commander George Rowell, the navigating officer, and Chief Yeoman of the Signals, Alfred Gilbert. Both Leach and Gilbert were knocked temporarily unconscious, while Rowell was seriously wounded with a jagged splinter of wood which entered his mouth and stuck out of his cheek. Of the two midshipmen who had been standing together directly in the path of the shell, nothing remained except a patch of blood and a flesh-splattered cap. The hit on the compass platform was also felt by Esmond Knight. It was to change his life forever.
From that moment everything seems hazy, except that I remember again hearing that great rushing noise, like the approach of a cyclone, and having a quite irrelevant dream about listening to the band in Hyde Park, and then being conscious of a high ringing noise in my head and slowly coming to. I had the sensation that I was dying. It was a strange feeling, and one that made me feel rather sad. No more. There was a lot of water swishing about. I was lying with a great weight on top of me. What on earth had happened?
Coming to, Knight could hear calls for stretcher bearers and the uncanny noise that men make when they are dying. Bundled down to the sick bay, he tried to open his eyes, but everything remained black. Placed on a bed, bandages were wrapped around his face. Knight was not to know it at the time, but he would never see perfectly again. He lay in the hospital bed listening to the sounds of battle until a morphine-induced sleep took hold of him. In a compartment below the bridge, a lieutenant plotting the course of the battle heard a rumble above. He called through the voice pipes and asked what had happened, but the only response he received was a trickle of blood which dripped from the voice pipes and onto the blotting paper. Having been dazed by the shell that crashed through the compass platform, within a few seconds, Leach regained his senses and moved control of the ship down to the Admiral's Bridge. At the same time as the hit on the compass platform, Prince of Wales was hit again. A shell struck one of the supports of the starboard boat deck crane and deflected it inboard and aft, where it exploded in the air just aft of the second funnel. Splinters and shell fragments started fires in the radar rooms below deck, where personnel were killed and wounded, numerous electrical leads were severed, and the fire main lead to the boat deck was cut. The Type 285 radio direction finding office was extensively damaged by splinters, and the personnel within were seriously wounded or killed. Shell fragments severed the telephone lead in the after high-angle director, which temporarily put this position out of action. The position had already sustained blast damage as a result of Y turret firing on a forward trajectory. Prinz Eugen was also scoring a number of hits on the British battleship. Further splinter damage was caused to the boat deck by an 8-inch shell which penetrated the deck. As the shell penetrated the deck, it sent further splinters into the after funnel. The shell passed obliquely through the superstructure and was ultimately deflected into the area beneath the port side 5.25-inch mount P3. The ship's Walrus aircraft was also damaged and was thrown overboard. At 6:03, on orders from Brinkmann, Prinz Eugen made the first of 3 turns to starboard before resuming her original course. The turns were executed at 6:03, 6:07 and 6:14 a.m. It was later claimed by Brinkmann that these series of turns were made to avoid 3 torpedo tracks, the sounds of which were reported by the ship's hydrophone operators. The war diary of the Prinz Eugen states, "The source of the torpedoes cannot be verified with certainty, since aircraft were in the vicinity. According to bearing and distance, they can only be shots from the Hood, whose torpedoes would have had the largest running track." It was also reported that Brinkmann himself saw the track of the torpedoes as they approached. It is likely the case that, if the hydrophone operators of the Prinz Eugen reported hearing anything, that it was in fact a false alarm. Hood was the only British ship in the engagement equipped with torpedoes, but it is unlikely that they were fired, owing to the ranges involved and owing to the tactical situation. Nevertheless, it must be noted that, while there is no evidence that the Hood fired torpedoes, the possibility cannot be totally discounted. The only individuals who could answer the question of whether or not Hood fired her torpedoes during the engagement all perished with the ship. The idea that Hood fired her torpedoes is more than likely an excuse by Brinkmann to justify the turns conducted by the Prinz Eugen, and likely arises from the fact that, at one point in the engagement, the heavy cruiser was within range of using her own torpedoes against Prince of Wales, but failed to make use of the opportunity, something for which Brinkmann would later be criticised. When Hood and Prince of Wales were sighted on the horizon, the German task force was sailing at 27 knots. When the engagement began, Bismarck worked up to 30 knots and began to pass down the port side of Prinz Eugen, which maintained 27 knots. It is more likely the case that Brinkmann realised that, with Bismarck sailing up the port side of his ship, and fire from Prince of Wales often falling over Bismarck, his ship was at an increased risk of being struck by a shell from one of the overs. Since Prinz Eugen would soon be in the line of fire, Brinkmann ordered the series of turns to starboard to increase the separation to Bismarck, and, with each turn, making the cruiser less vulnerable to being hit. The manoeuvre also placed Prinz Eugen on the lee side of Bismarck's schooner, providing the cruiser with greater protection from fire by Prince of Wales. At 6:09, Bismarck became visible in the main battery director of the Prinz Eugen, and the order was issued not to fire over the battleship. At this time, Prinz Eugen subsequently ceased fire. While Prinz Eugen had been conducting her starboard turns, at 6:05, with his ship incurring significant damage and with guns out of action and outgunned, Leach decided to execute a turn to port while producing a smokescreen and to break off the action. With Prince of Wales partially obscured by smoke as she broke off the engagement, Bismarck reduced fire from full salvos to groups of turrets, forward and aft, before finally reducing fire further to individual turrets, which accounted for the rippling effect reported by some of Prince of Wales's crew. Taking up a course of 160 degrees, Prince of Wales began to sail an almost perpendicular course to Bismarck and Prinz Eugen, and was difficult to discern amongst the smoke screen that was generated. At 6:06 a.m., Bismarck fired her first split salvo with her forward turrets, followed 10 seconds later by her aft turrets at a range of just over 8.5 miles. Turrets Caesar and Dora fired a second split salvo 40 seconds later at a range of just less than 9 miles. Over the next minute, 3 further split salvos were fired, 2 of them from the forward turrets and 1 from the after group. After firing the split salvos from the aft turrets, ranging salvos were fired from turrets Anton, Caesar and Dora. The range to Prince of Wales had by now increased to around 9.5 miles. With the British battleship becoming more obscure due to the increasing range and smoke, the further expenditure of ammunition became unwarranted. Lutjens therefore decided to call off the battle. A final salvo was fired at the departing Prince of Wales from the forward turrets before the order to cease fire was given at 10 minutes past 6. Having issued the order for Bismarck to cease fire, Lutjens then proceeded to order Prince Eugen to once more take up the guide of the task force. Immediately, Prince Eugen began to increase speed, working up to 32.5 knots. The heavy cruiser would maintain this speed until 6:20 before, once having passed the flagship and attained a comfortable distance ahead, she reduced speed to just over 30 knots. As Prince of Wales retired, following a ceasefire aboard Bismarck, Lindemann wanted to continue the battle and pursue the damaged British battleship. Lindemann pointed out to Lutjens that, during the course of the action, the ship had expended only 93 15-inch shells in sinking Hood and driving off Prince of Wales. He pressed the point that the sinking of Prince of Wales would be another major triumph for the Kriegsmarine. It was later reported that Lindemann's desire to pursue and sink Prince of Wales and Lutjens' decision to not pursue led to an argument between the two about breaking off the action. Such a debate between an admiral and captain was contrary to the traditions of the German Navy. Lindemann was, however, a person who spoke his mind. Nevertheless, as fleet commander and, by holding rank, Lutjens had complete authority. With the Battle of the Denmark Strait over, Norfolk and Suffolk settled down once more to commence shadowing Bismarck and Prince Eugen. Having broken off the action, Prince of Wales continued to retire at full speed on a course of 160 degrees. Once out of range of Bismarck's guns, a reduction of speed was ordered and, at around 6:30 a.m., she began a turn to port, which would see her circle around and take up a course to join HMS Norfolk. As Prince of Wales retired from the battle, a damage assessment began to be undertaken. In total, the ship had sustained 7 hits. 4 of the sustained hits were caused by 15-inch shells from Bismarck, while 3 8-inch shells from Prince Eugen had also struck the battleship. It was not just through enemy fire that Prince of Wales had sustained damage. The battleship's own gunfire had resulted in a number of, albeit minor, self-inflicted wounds, which included numerous fractured ventilation trunks, general damage to woodwork and light fittings, damage to hangar fittings, and blast damage to the aft high-angle director caused by Y turret. Almost as soon as the ship had broken off the engagement, Leach had the crew prepared to re-engage Bismarck. As the damage control teams, under the leadership of Lieutenant Dennis Wildish and Lieutenant Edward Murch, began to get the flooding under control, the personnel from Vickers Armstrongs were checking the guns with the gun crews in all of the turrets and directing repairs within the turrets themselves. The destruction of the Hood and the outfighting and retirement of the Royal Navy's newest battleship was a stunning German victory. It had, however, come at a cost. Prince of Wales had succeeded in scoring 3 hits on Bismarck. Despite this, casualties were light, with only 5 crew members wounded. During the course of the battle, Prince of Wales fired a total of 21 salvos at Bismarck, all involving 5 guns or less. Because of the inexperience of her crew, it took Prince of Wales 5 salvos to obtain a straddle, with salvos 6 through 13 falling near or around Bismarck. The gunnery accuracy of the ship decreased after the loss of the Hood, owing to the need to take evasive action and damage from German shells. What is ever more impressive is that Macmillan managed to score 3 hits on Bismarck by employing a total of 55 shells, giving Prince of Wales an average of 1 hit for every 18.33 shells fired. Bismarck, by contrast, with her fully functioning main armament, scored 4 hits against the British battleship, firing 93 shells, in the process producing a hit ratio of 1 hit for every 22 to 23 shells fired. Furthermore, Prince of Wales scored her first hit 3 minutes after opening fire, and after firing 3 partial salvos of approximately 20 shells. Conversely, it took the Bismarck 5 full salvos, 4 minutes and 40 shells to produce her first hit, which, for Hood, proved fatal. Despite only scoring 3 hits on Bismarck, serious damage was caused by 2 of the hits, which collectively ended Operation Rheinübung and the Bismarck's sortie into the Atlantic. A hit had been sustained just below the waterline amidships, while the other serious hit was sustained on the bow. This hit on the bow was sustained above the waterline. A shell struck the bow and created a large oblique hole and passed through the bow with an angle of fall of approximately 15 degrees, whereupon it had exited out the starboard side. The shell entered the ship just above the battery deck, which was a watertight deck throughout the ship, and travelled from port to starboard, exiting the bow just above the Zweischen deck. As the exit hole was just above the waterline, but within the false bow wave, water flowed in and flooded compartments on the upper, middle, and lower platform decks. The ship trimmed by the bow, which coupled with the pitching into the sea, served to aggravate the problem. Reserve fuel tanks were located in the vicinity of the shell's trajectory, below the middle deck. Splinters, caused by the passage of the shell through the ship, severed pipes to these tanks and damaged the structure in the deck or platform above these tanks. With a transverse watertight bulkhead damaged, the main fuel line to the forward fuel bunkers cut, and the bilge flooding and fuel oil transfer pumps covered by flood water, any remaining fuel in the reserve fuel tanks was cut off. At the same time, fuel began to leak from the hole in the bow. Shortly after 10 a.m., Bismarck and Prinz Eugen switched positions once more, with the cruiser taking up a position in the wake of the Bismarck to try and disrupt and dissipate the trail of fuel oil.
Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more updates, like and share. You can also help to support the channel at Patreon. Details are in the description box below. If you enjoyed this content, why not also check out my Substack page for more unique historical insights and articles. A link to the page is in the description box below.